coup d'etat or forceful overthrow of a government has been viewed globally as an aberration and a serious threat to the much acceptable democracy. Now, African countries has at the turn of the century rapidly embraced democracy in all its ramifications. But recent happenings in some African nations, which saw a rise in rebellion and forceful military overthrow of democratic governments, has cast doubts over the sustenance of democracy in Africa. We're taking a look at the Central African Republic, the coup and the implications. The African Union, AU Commission and the United Nations have condemned Sunday's seizure of government by rebels in the Central African Republic. While the chair of AU Commission, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, urged member nations to take unified position against the coup, the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon called for the earliest return of constitutional order. Now, Dlamini Zuma said AU statutes in the case of anti-constitutional change of power provides for the country's suspension from AU activities, the complete isolation of those responsible, and adoption of a sanction. Now, rebels seized control of the capital Bangui after President Francois Bozize reportedly fled the country to neighboring Cameroon, and Michel Djotodia himself as the new claimed and named himself the new leader. The rebels, who gave a deadline last week, launched its bid to oust Bozize in December 2012, accusing him of failing to implement a series of peace accords since 2007. Now, the agreement which ousted the president allegedly refused to implement includes release of political prisoners, integrating rebels into national army, as well as pulling out South African and Ugandan troops protecting the government. Central African Republic has endured several coups and has been unstable since independence from France in 1960. What should be the stand of AU? What are the implications of the coup? How can constitutional order be restored? What can bring stability to the country? These will form the basis of our discussion this Tuesday. And we are joined in the studio this morning by two gentlemen. We have with us Farouk Bibi Farouk. He is a lecturer from the University of Abuja. Bibi, it's nice to have you again.
Thank you very much.
We also have joining us Dr. Eke Agbai, ex-director, Center for Policy and Foreign Engagement. You're both welcome.
Thank you.
All right, let's take a look at what's happening. Bibi, let's start from you. A look at what's happening in the Central African Republic. The rebels have named, the leader of the rebels has named himself the new president and has declared, just about a few hours ago, declared that he's willing to engage in a power-sharing government. That is, of course, to douse the international outcry against what has happened in the Central Republic of Africa. Now, what is your take on all of this?
Well, thank you very much. I think, first and foremost, although international media and all media seem to portray what is happening at Central African Republic as a coup, I do not see it as the conventional coup that we know, where a standing army takes over from the civilians or from within itself, as we have. What we have there are bandits, groups with their identities and flags, and sometimes political parties, coming together, going to the bush against whatever type of standing army is existing, whatever other institutions of states are existing, the police, the judiciary, and so on, declaring right from the word go their refusal to submit to those institutions and coming from the bush to take over government. So it's kind of a bush rebellion, not really a coup. Because it has not happened once or twice, even in the Central African Republic, it has been accommodated as a coup, whereby state, national OAU and Co could feel to have an input. But I do not think that OAU, United Nations, and other global institutions would have that amount of leverage they expect of reversing the process, forcing them to go back into a democratic system as easy as if it was a conventional coup. The history of Central African Republic is such that right from independence, they have had leaders that have actually personalized the state. After David Dako, Bokassa in particular, came in and practically became an emperor. It's a vast country with a lot of resources, but unfortunately for them, the most common resource they have is diamond. And diamond is not like oil, is not like even gold, where you take in bulk. You take in bits. So it is very easy for rebel groups to come up, take over an area where there is diamond, continue to mine diamond for themselves, make a lot of money, and buy arms. So the history of, even the contemporary history is such that up in the north, the south, the east, I think it is only their border with Cameroon that there is no serious insurrection happening. They are bordering Sudan, Darfur, southern Sudan. They are bordering Congo by one side. They have Chad. You see, so everywhere you look around, there are bandits with weapons who have assimilated themselves into the struggle for the rebels. In fact, the Lord Resistance Army now, which is an Ugandan rebel movement, is more in Central African Republic than anywhere else.
All right, so you don't see this as a coup?
I do not see it as a coup, actually. I see it as a failure of state.
Okay.
Which is common now in Africa. It is happening in Democratic Republic of Congo, like it has happened in Somalia. It is something like that. And it is being seen in even more stable nations like us.
Okay, let's bring Dr. Agbai in now. Doctor, you heard what Bibi said. Let's look at the statements by the chair of the AU, Lamini Zuma, who said that member nations should take unified position against, she describes it as a coup. She believes that member nations should take a stand against them. What are you satisfied with the statement of Lamini Zuma?
Well, it does not matter how you see it. Is a coup. A coup d'etat is when there is a forceful overthrow of government or taking over government in an undemocratic fashion. And for you to put it in perspective, first, yes, the Central African Republic has gone through a series of instability, right, from her independence. But I think the point here is the failure of states. There is the necessity in the 21st century for African leaders to realize that the only way that you have a chance of remaining in the government is if you develop your institutions, if there is a very effective governance, if there's no corruption, prudent management of resources in order to meet the aspirations of the people. Where these do not happen, you become vulnerable and expose yourself to incidents of this nature. So yes, AU has taken a stand, but how effective is that stand? The new leader of the coup has quickly said that he is going to respect the Gabon Accord. And the Gabon Accord, of course, was the peace accord in Libreville, calling for unity government. Then the Seleko group is made up of 5 different rebel groups, and each of them has her agenda. To the extent that they are able to unify the agenda is going to be very difficult. It has serious security implication right now on the Chad side. And that implication is what it gives me extreme concern. Because with the proliferation of ammunition, weapons everywhere, and we are seeing the utilization of these weapons in the execution of a lot of terrorist activities in the sub-regional African states. The neighboring countries of Cameroon, if Cameroon, the 2, Congo, there's a chance that this will infiltrate those areas and begin to make their way even to Nigeria. So there's need to immediately assist this government in making sure, because there's no way they can reverse, and why they cannot reverse it, because the history of this country is of this nature. So what they need to do is to immediately give them a transition timetable that hopefully in the 3 years that they have claimed that they will restore constitutional democracy, that they will assist them in making sure that all the different rebel forces that constitute the Seleka group are able to, with the civil society, the public, to come up first and foremost to have a constitution for the country. Okay. A constitution that will promote effective democracy. But I say it even at the risk of repetition, that the only way to stop the attraction is first for leaders in Africa to see the necessity to really govern and govern properly. And what is governance? Governance is simply trying to deliver the dividends of democracy. The level of corruption is such that there's no way you will continue to have a corrupt country and the people will stay idle. In as much as I condemn this coup in toto, but what we're trying to say, what can we do in order to stop this form of government takeover over and over? Because it does not matter how much you speak about democracy, I'm still yet to see an alternative government that is better than democracy.
Okay, that is in the near future, in the long term. In the short term, right now, the chair of AU, like I said earlier, says member nations should unify against this group. Now, one of the things that she's also said, or some of the things, is that they should be suspended from all AU activities. They should be isolated completely, and those responsible, should be brought to book, and a sanction should be adopted. What would you recommend? Will this make any difference in the case right now of the Central African Republic?
Well, that's why I said it's not the conventional kind of coup, where there is a state institution for them to come into the international fora with. They are coming from the bush. They are not yet interested in being recognized. They want to establish themselves according to their local environment, which is a lot of politics, intricacies, tribal things, religious things on the ground. So to start by saying isolate them, don't accommodate them, don't bring them in, they are already not yet ready for that. They are coming from the bush.
So that may not be their immediate interest.
Serve anything. I think key to getting anything done in Central African Republic has always been the French, because they have never left the place. They have a standing force all the time. And they could protect a government like they have done in the past, or they could give up a government and it falls like they have done now. Because if you remember before January, December, November, when Bouzizi asked for French help, they told him point plain that we are not in Central African Republic to protect your government, but to protect French interest. What is that French interest? The diamonds that they are controlling and other mineral resources, including timber. Now, at a point in time, by January, African countries, South Africa, Angola, Chad, and so on, who felt the threat that my colleague was talking about, got together, put in a peacekeeping force, in quote, to stop the Seleka rebels. But with Mali, you can't find Chad, you can't find a lot of those countries. Now they are involved in Mali. That gave another opportunity for the Seleka to confront only South Africa and probably Angola. And you can see South Africa has been bloodied in this encounter. Probably it will be a lesson for them in future. The French are not involved. Now, if there is going to be any reasonable governance coming in, I think what is likely going to happen, talk to the French, they will put these people together, they know them very well, help them form a government like they have done with others, and then that government can begin to come into the international fora. I think it's more or less a French interest thing of taking African resources like it does in other places, and when they are not in your ready to sacrifice to keep you there, or they are not you are not in their good books, they give you up. This is happening in most of French African
which is why a lot of the times African leaders, some African leaders have said that African problems are African problems and the solution should come from Africans. Now the rebels have claimed that there will be a free and fair election organized in 3 years' time. Now do you think that AU should agree to that, or AU should insist that the constitutional government that was, chased out of office be restored? What would you recommend?
Well, we have to be very pragmatic. in as much as you want to discourage this form of government overthrow through a coup d'etat, but you have to look at the peculiarity and uniqueness of each situation and take it. In the case of CAR, if you impose sanction, now the question on the list becomes, who are going to suffer from those sanctions? I am troubled by, there must be a way we must send the message that African countries are no longer in a position to tolerate this form of change of government. Now, traveling bans on the leaders, yes, because we must be able to have a deterrent. There must be travel. But what is more important is to help them through this transitional program and insist that as soon as possible that there is a transitional process that will bring about a constitutional democratic system on ground. And that is all inclusive. 2, we must find a way to reconcile the different 5 rebel groups because each of them has an agenda. How do you reconcile that agenda to be in tandem, to be in reconciliation with the yearnings of the people? Because at the end of the day, it's all about the people. But you see, if you look at that region, she has suffered a series of coups. And he alluded to, even at the time, they tried a monarchy that produced Emperor Bokassa. It appears that what needs to be done right now is how do we help this very country, the poorest country in the universe, very unstable. Western governments must look beyond their economic interests and help African countries to stabilize and stabilize, making sure that the leaders they support are on the side of the people. Until now, and I keep repeating, the problem has been lack of leadership. The problem has been poor governance. The problem has been trying to personalize, what I call personification instead of institutionalization of means of government. And when you do that, you become susceptible and vulnerable to this form of government. So AU must first of all assist in making sure that all the groups come together and begin to form a unity government, which have done. And of course, the leader was smart enough to say, we are going to respect the Gabon Accord that calls for unity government. We are not going to change anything. All the people involved there are going to be a part of this process, which is the pragmatism that I talked about, which has made it very difficult for AU to really see them as a group that will not make good their promise.
Okay. We've talked about what the Western world can do for the Central African Republic, but like Bibi said, the French, who you would have expected will be interested, are saying they're not dead to support the constitutional, government of Francois Bozize, who right now has fled. Now, the United States and the France region that brokered, power broker in Chad on the Seleka group, has also called for the Gabon Accord to be respected by the rebels who have taken over power in the Central African Republic. Let's take a look at exactly what the Gabon Accord says and how it will benefit the people of the Central African Republic, because at the end of the day, they are the ones at the receiving end.
Well, it's very ironic and to me quite funny that the Gabon Accord is being given any prominence. For Seleka, I understand they will play the politics of stabilization now. But they are a product of the breach of that same accord. They accepted that the leadership of Bozize, the democratic leadership of Bozize, as part of that accord. Then they accepted that they were going to be part of a government and participate in a democratic process in the future. They accepted that foreign forces, especially that the South African and Angolan and so other forces that Bozize invited to protect him would go. They believed there was a breach. He believed there was a breach. So where is the Libreville Accord? Now, since it is the breach of that Libreville Accord that made the coup possible, coup and quote, like I insist, possible. You see, at a point in time, they were strong enough to come to Bangui. They were stopped because forces amassed. Then naturally, because the forces had to leave, they saw an opportunity, they breached the Libreville Accord, and they took over government. It's clear politics. But I can say that is the only thing we have. That's the only thing we have with them that is an agreement. And like my colleague said, they're a very fluid group. 5 different rebel groups with different agenda, armed, bandits, I'll call them bandits, you know, with flags, identifying different things, belonging to certain tribal groups, some of them having religious identities. We shouldn't forget that, because the history of that place was part of Borno Empire in the past. It was part of the Sudan Empire. You know, the French came and modeled it together, put up a country out of what was other empires. Now, what Africans need to understand, AU and the rest, is this fire is in everybody's backyard, because we're a product of a system that is very difficult to stabilize, the colonial system. That is the key problem, that these tribes have never really accepted to come together. We are still having that debate here in Nigeria. Maybe in an advanced stage, because there is sufficient resources. We are not as poor as they are. But everybody has that fire. And look at the countries.
But then again, a lot of the times when these issues are raised, African leaders run to the same Western countries that you are saying now have no interest in stabilizing, or their beliefs have caused the problems in Africa.
They can't accommodate the costs anymore. It was much easier because you will be dealing with a group of officers probably in the army that were trained by the same colonial people. You can talk to them, you can engage them. Today you are dealing with rebel forces that are all over. You have to have a protracted war. Look at Mali. It was expected that in 1 month things would have stabilized. But France cannot stay there more than a month. So the resources available, the military ability to do this protracted thing is not there anymore in the West. Some of their key countries are already facing economic crisis. They are not. Even the U.S. is not ready to go anywhere anymore and entrench its forces to achieve political interest. So, and these rebel movements are also aware of these things.
Okay, Dr. Agbai.
I think what needs to be, just along the line you're talking about, first they need to help them develop their economic resources. You spoke about the Libreville Accord. The Libreville Accord, just like you said, the excuse that it was the non-compliance was what necessitated the coup is not actually the reason. The reason is that this is a country that is just used to taking coups. So first, you must help them develop a blueprint to install a democratic process.
Now, who is going to help them do that?
The AU and United Nations, France and the United States.
That's assuming France and the United States are interested.
No, see, they have interest because what happens there has serious implications, even to their national policy and their foreign policy. They have their nationals that live there. If you, the first thing they did was to send in about 200 of their forces to protect their nationals. They have economic interest there. But my concern is the interest of the people of CAR. And the interest begins with first to have economic development, economic activity. And for that to happen, they must develop their political institutions. They must have an independent electoral system. So by the time election comes, it seems to be democratic, it seems to be fair, it seems to be free.
But first there will have to be a stable...
And for them to have a stable government, the process is what will lead to a stable government. So what needs to be done now is to make sure that there will have forces there that will help them go through this process. If you do not have that, chances are there are people who are planning for another coup. And if you look at there appears to be a pattern from 1960. They have series of coups. Dako has done his coup. Even Bozizi himself is a product of coup of 2003. Okay. He took over government.
Okay.
So when you look at that,
with the support of the French.
With the support of, so what you look at, the only way you can do that is begin to institute a democratic process. It takes time, but it needs guidance, and that's what they did the most.
We've got to go. Bibi, yes. Your final word. What is the implication of letting the rebels stay in power in the next 2 to 3 years? That's assuming they're willing to relinquish in 3 years' time. Your final word now.
Well, my final word is that we are getting into a really contradictory situation in Africa, whereby we think that the Western countries would help us by telling us how to govern ourselves, while their real interest is taking those resources that we need to establish the institutions and the economy that will help us stabilize. Central African Republic has been independent since 1960, where the institutions, in the capital there is no water, there is no electricity. French has been there since before 1966, 100 years ago. If there was an interest to use the resources of those countries to develop that country, something would have happened by now. Now, the refusal to do that is creating this crisis, and we are expecting that going back to these countries who only want the economic resources, that we will get stability. I think Africans will be fooling themselves. We have to find another way out.
We're going to have to leave it at that. I'd like to thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so very much for joining me this morning. We've been taking a look at the Central African Republic, the coup and the implications. And I've had joined me this morning, Bibi Farouk, University of Abuja. Nice to have you again.
Thank you.
We also had Dr. Eke Agbai, ex-director, Center for Policy.
That's executive director.
Ex-executive.
Executive director.
Okay. Executive. Oh, I beg your pardon. And that was what I said earlier.
Yes.
Oh, my apologies.
No longer. And the last time I checked, I'm still receiving my
You're still there. All right. Executive Director, Center for Policy and Foreign Engagement. Please pardon me again. Yes. Nice to have you join us, and thank you so much for your insights. Well, our guests have said one thing together. At the end of the day, it depends on the Central African Republic and the AU and, of course, the UN to do something for this country and help them stabilize and find a constitutional government that will be willing to change the lifestyle and change the situation of the Central African Republic, so rich in mineral resources, yet so poor. That seems to be the story of many African countries.